Lee Marvin named the 7 actors he hated most. The legendary film icon of the 1950s and 1960s, until his last breath, called certain people by one phrase, the ones I never want to see again. Throughout his career, he pointed out publicly 7 names he hated the most. Nor was he flawless, nor did he want to please anyone. Marvin lived like a soldier, direct, disciplined, and unafraid of confrontation. He would throw his hat to the ground, smash a whiskey glass, or even walk away from a role if it meant not sharing the screen with someone he couldn't respect. Off-screen, he never minced words when calling those people out in harshest terms. "I'd rather hang up my gun and leave the screen than stand next to a fake hero," he said once. Those 7 names weren't nobodies. They were legends, stars in their own right, admired by the public, former co-stars, and even men he had once toasted after a scene. Behind that deep hatred, though, lay something more, wounded pride, jealousy, or maybe even a truth about a darker side of Hollywood. Born in 1924 in New York, Lee Marvin grew up in a family with great military traditions. When World War II broke out, he dropped out of school, enlisted in the Marine Corps, and was sent to the Pacific Front. During the Battle of Saipan, he was struck by machine gun fire, suffering a severe sciatic nerve injury that kept him hospitalized for over a year. He earned the Purple Heart A, symbol of the blood and bone he left on the battlefield. Perhaps war itself shaped Lee Marvin, blunt, tough, and uncompromising. Unlike Hollywood stars, who only wore a uniform for the camera, Marvin had lived the reality of combat. He'd crawled through trenches, watched comrades fall beside him, and carried a battle scar on his back for the rest of his life. That experience turned him into an actor who didn't need to act. Every fierce glare and tight-jawed expression came from real memories, not performance tricks. After leaving the military, Marvin didn't walk into Hollywood overnight. He drifted through odd jobs, lived like an invisible man, until one day, fate intervened. An actor fell ill, and Marvin was pulled in at the last minute to take his place. Untrained and unprepared, he exploded onto the stage. Towering, cold-eyed, raw with energy, he was unforgettable. From nameless thugs to commanding leads, his rise was unstoppable. In the big heat of 1953, Marvin played a ruthless gangster who chilled audiences. By Bad Day at Black Rock in 1955, one look from him could stretch tension to its breaking point. Then came The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance in 1962, in which his portrayal of the villain Liberty Valance eclipsed even stars John Wayne and James Stewart. 3 years later, in Cat Ballou of 1965, he surprised the world playing both a drunken wreck and a cold-blooded killer, a performance that garnered him the Academy Award for Best Actor. But that very success made Marvin an outsider in glamorous Hollywood. He despised pretense and could not forgive those who wore fame like a costume or disrespected the craft. All through his career, he listed 7 people he would never work with, never shake hands with, and never even look at again. 1. John Wayne the hero who never went to war. John Wayne, it seemed, stood for everything Marvin despised. The eternal cowboy, the icon of American heroism. While the roles Wayne played in the movies were of the brave soldier, Marvin had lived it in real life, crawling through mud, dodging bullets, and carrying dying comrades. Wayne had stayed behind during World War II, building his image while others fought. To Marvin, that wasn't just hypocrisy, it was betrayal. Things came to a head on the set of the Comancheros. When Wayne asked Marvin half-jokingly to tone down the intensity, Marvin didn't laugh. He stared him down and said, "You might play a soldier better than I do, but you'll never know the smell of mud, the taste of blood, or the sound of bullets over your head." The room fell silent. Though they finished the film and took publicity photos together, Marvin's respect for Wayne died that day. 2. Frank Sinatra, the king of ego. If anyone made Marvin's blood boil, that was Frank Sinatra, the famous crooner, an icon, and a living embodiment of Hollywood arrogance. Marvin didn't hate his talent, but his attitude. Sinatra was notorious for arriving late, walking off sets, and expecting the whole world to orbit around him. Once, after making a crew wait 5 hours, Sinatra arrived with a cigarette dangling from his lips and said, "Hope you've all been waiting long enough." Marvin, who treated professionalism like a soldier treated orders, just about attacked him. The feud continued until Sinatra quit the Dirty Dozen in 1967, ostensibly due to scheduling conflicts, though many thought he didn't want to share the screen with a real war veteran. Years later, when someone asked him if he regretted it, Marvin said with chilling calm, "I've faced machine guns and lived. When I face Frank Sinatra, I feel absolutely nothing." 3. Burt Lancaster, Clash of the Titans. While Marvin's feud with Sinatra was fiery, the one with Burt Lancaster was icy and silent, a Cold War of pride and power. Both were towering figures in 1960s Hollywood, and studios dreamed of pairing their strengths. But Lancaster refused to co-star, saying Marvin didn't have the depth for complex roles. Marvin fired back, "I don't need to pretend to be deep, I just act real." From then on, the two avoided each other at all costs. One film had Marvin's role reduced, allegedly because of Lancaster's influence. Marvin refused to appear in any project that involved them. At parties, they wouldn't utter a word to each other. Lancaster once sneered, "Some people shout on screen because they have nothing else to show." Marvin's response cut deep, "Maybe that's because I shouted on a battlefield, not on a stage." Their rivalry became the stuff of legend, not of guns or glory, but of pride. Producers knew better than to put them in the same room. Hollywood could afford many things, but not Lee Marvin and Burt Lancaster under one roof. If Burt Lancaster drove Lee Marvin mad with ego, then Robert Mitchum pushed him over the edge for a much simpler reason: a complete lack of respect for the craft of acting. 4. Robert Mitchum, the idolized slacker. Mitchum was a great talent, no one could deny that. His rugged good looks, devil-may-care attitude, and effortlessly cool made him one of the most magnetic men ever to grace the screen. But it was precisely that effortless quality that made Marvin want to throw a punch every time he saw him walk onto a set. From day one, Marvin was infuriated by Mitchum's behavior, showing up drunk, forgetting his lines, and openly admitting he didn't care. During one pivotal scene, while the crew was waiting for their cue, Mitchum nodded off on set. Marvin didn't say a word at first. He simply walked over and slapped him hard across the face. "Wake up," he growled. "This is a film set, not a bar." Instead of sobering him, the slap only added fuel to their simmering fire. At a Hollywood Hills party, a drunken Mitchum hurled a glass at the wall after Marvin called him a lazy man worshipped like a god. The tension spilled onto the set. During one critical take, Mitchum deliberately changed his lines while cameras rolled, ruining Marvin's performance and forcing a complete reshoot. For Marvin, this wasn't just unprofessional, it was a betrayal. Then he suddenly hurled his script to the floor, pages scattering like shrapnel. "You think this is a joke?" he roared. "Dozens of people are working their asses off, and hundreds of hours are wasted because one man doesn't respect the craft." No one had ever seen Marvin lose his temper like that. From that day forward, he refused to speak to Mitchum. Not a word, not even a glance. Producers learned quickly. If Marvin saw Mitchum's name on a cast list, he'd drop the script and walk away. If Lancaster had been a knife to Marvin's pride, Mitchum was a punch to his very belief in acting itself. And after that clash, Marvin didn't just despise Mitchum. He despised the whole system that turned careless men into legends. But Mitchum wasn't the last star to make Marvin grind his teeth at Hollywood's new order. There was still one more cowboy, a younger one who, in Marvin's eyes, basked in the spotlight without ever breaking a sweat: Clint Eastwood. 5. Clint Eastwood, Two Alpha Wolves. When Clint Eastwood rose to fame in the late 1960s, Hollywood had changed. It was no longer a place for men who had survived bombs and bullets. It was a playground for cool, quiet icons who knew how to stand in the right light and say the right line. To Marvin, a man who had crawled through mud and carried dying brothers from the battlefield, that felt like an insult. The tensions on the set of Paint Your Wagon, 1969, were evident from the very start. Marvin treated every scene as if it were some kind of mission. Eastwood appeared effortlessly calm, detached, almost too composed. One day, when Eastwood was fiddling with his hair in front of a mirror, Marvin said icily, "A real cowboy doesn't comb his hair before a gunfight." What sounded like a quip was a dig at Eastwood's carefully manufactured cool. Behind the scenes, Marvin ridiculed Eastwood's lack of real-life grit. Eastwood, for his part, kept away from a fight, sometimes telling friends, "Some people still live in the past and die there." The atmosphere on set was electric with unspoken rivalry. Both men were alpha wolves, and neither would yield. The film finished and hit theaters, but the two would never share the screen again. To Marvin, Eastwood wasn't evil. He was merely the face of a Hollywood that no longer valued truth. 6. Yul Brynner, the king of the limelight. If Marvin saw Eastwood as a symbol of effortless cool, he viewed Yul Brynner as the embodiment of ego. Brynner wasn't just an actor. He was a phenomenon. On set, he insisted that every light be adjusted just so to highlight the exact angle of his gleaming bald head. When directors complained about delays, Brynner shrugged and said, "The audience comes to see me." Marvin, believing that acting came from sweat and truth, smirked. "I thought this was a film, not a lighting show." Their tension exploded when Brynner refused to shake Marvin's hand at a casting session, saying, "You'll learn how to stand behind me." Marvin never forgot it. Years later, when offered a major role alongside Brynner, he withdrew within 48 hours. No film, he said, was worth standing in another man's shadow. Marvin's disdain became legendary. "He doesn't act," he once sneered. "He just waits for the light to hit him." And each time those words reached Brynner, he reportedly demanded even brighter lighting. To Hollywood, it was an ego war. To Marvin, it was proof that vanity had replaced art. 7. Tony Curtis, the lounge act pretty boy, while Brynner's vanity amused Marvin. Tony Curtis' presence enraged him. To Marvin, Curtis was the poster child of fake Hollywood, slick hair, movie star smile, and soft romantic roles that required nothing real. On a 1960s talk show, when asked about Curtis, Marvin deadpanned, "Tony Curtis might survive Hollywood, but he wouldn't last 5 minutes in a real fight." During one joint photo shoot, Marvin couldn't resist another jab. "He sprays on more perfume than the blood I've spilled on the battlefield." The tension between them became public. When a studio tried pairing them for a blockbuster, Marvin issued 3 impossible demands: replace the director, rewrite the script, and add more fight scenes to expose the weakling. Curtis stormed off, and the project collapsed. The feud finally reached its climax at a Hollywood party. In the presence of a crowd, Curtis mocked Marvin. "Some people have to shout just to get attention." Marvin walked over, calm but deadly serious. "Maybe," he said, "because I once shouted to stay alive, and you've never known what it means to fight." From that night on, they became sworn enemies. Curtis would not mention Marvin in any interview, and Marvin called him the perfect symbol of a film industry dying from its obsession with appearances. To Marvin, Curtis wasn't just a rival. He was proof of everything wrong with Hollywood, a place that celebrated beauty over truth, charm over courage, and image over integrity. Looking back at the 7 names Lee Marvin mentioned, one finds box office legends and kings of the silver screen. To him, however, they all shared one unpardonable trait: arrogance, so bloated they believed the world revolved around them. They had forgotten what authenticity looked like on film. Marvin himself wasn't a saint. He was hot-tempered, rough-edged, brutally honest. But he lived truthfully. In a world of fake smiles and hidden knives, Marvin chose to live like a soldier, to walk straight, shoot straight, and never pretend. Lee Marvin died in August of 1987 at the age of 63. He was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery, not as a Hollywood star, but as a soldier coming home to rest among fallen comrades. That final image says everything about the man he was.